Welcome to Game Pass in Review. While Game Pass does provide a very low barrier to entry when it comes to checking out what's on offer, there is still the barrier of free time. And as many of us listening are seasoned, free time is a barrier we all know too well. To help with this first world problem, I'm here to give you quick impressions on all the major Game Pass releases for each month. This month being April 2022. Some quick disclaimers to get out of the way. These are more or less impressions of the games with what we hope will be enough information for you to determine if it's worth your time and your bandwidth. These are not intended to replace reviews and therefore will not be scored. Although we will do our best to play and provide impressions and information on every game that enters the service on any given month, sometimes there are just so many games that some may inevitably fall through the cracks. We will be focusing mostly on games that launch on the console side of the service, with some PC as well. Games that previously launched on console that are now making their way to PC, or vice versa, will likely not make the list. We also will not be covering games that are revealed to be making their cloud debut on the service. This is for new games entering the service on console or PC. For the first month of Game Pass in review, April was no slouch. Xbox has shown an affinity for casting a very wide net in terms of the types of games they offer their customers, and to that end, they quite literally hit a home run here. We have sports games, action games, mysteries, deck builders, strategy games, adventure games, and even sentient snack hunting games. There's a lot here, so let's jump right in. First up at bat, we have MLB The Show 2022 from Sony San Diego Studios, published by Sony Studios. I don't think I'll ever get used to seeing that Sony Studios logo animation on my Xbox, but here we are with MLB The Show launching on Game Pass for the second consecutive year. There has been somewhat of an uprising building up over the last few years with sports fans who are getting tired of the perceived level of effort going into each annualized release of their favorite sports games. Although MLB The Show 2021 was nowhere near the worst offender here, they were also not immune to this criticism. With The Show 2022, however, they are aiming to distance themselves from that stigma and are including some pretty cool updates here. There are some market improvements to the iconic Road to the Show mode with an in-universe podcast tying events of the game together, complete with full-on FMV and celebrity guest stars, which really added to the immersion for me. I always enjoyed when these podcasts showed up. The Stadium Builder has seen some pretty decent improvements over last year's as well. Perhaps most notably though, is the addition of online co-op play. This feature that had been long requested also pairs very nicely with the newly included full cross-play support that makes its way to the show finally, including also launching on the Nintendo Switch, so it should be easier than ever to find people to play with. MLB The Show continues to be the best modern baseball game you can play these days. If you are a fan of America's pastime, then you will definitely want to check this one out. Next up, we have Chinatown Detective Agency from General Interactive Co., published by Humble Games. General Interactive Co. is a small 3-person team that's founded in Singapore, but is actually based all over the world, and Chinatown Detective Agency is their sophomore outing. CDA, as the title hints, is a detective game heavily inspired by the Carmen Sandiego games from the 80s and 90s, where your wit and critical thinking far outweigh your thumb speed and hand-eye coordination. Just like in Carmen Sandiego, you will need to conduct real-world research and investigations to solve some of the game's puzzles and mysteries. This means actively leaving the game to conduct your own research online, or perhaps, if you want to play on hard mode, busting out that library card and visiting your local library. A very interesting concept that has been somewhat lost to time until now. Unlike Carmen Sandiego though, this game takes place in a near-future cyberpunk setting, having more in common with Blade Runner or Black Mirror than the original children's cartoon of the 80s and 90s. In this game, you play as Amira Dharma, a former cop turned private investigator. You are an up-and-coming private eye and are open to taking on any and all clients, even the shady ones, as you try to establish yourself and your business. The game features some nice ambiance and pixel art with a near fully voiced cast, which is nice to see in an indie game. The puzzles here are very complex and will likely test some players' patience. However, for those that have an inquisitive mind and an appetite for an intellectual challenge, there are not a lot of games out there that will be as intellectually rewarding as this one. Definitely recommend checking this out for puzzle fans, especially ones who have fond memories of playing Carmen Sandiego way back. Next up is Life is Strange True Colors, developed by Deck 9 and published by Square Enix. True Colors is the third mainline game in the Life is Strange series, but it's the first time that Deck 9 has actually been given the keys to a full release, having previously created the fantastic Before the Storm prequel spin-off to the original game. Hailing from Boulder, Colorado, Deck 9 is actually one of the oldest studios in our industry. Originally named Idle Minds, the studio ironically was founded by two ex-Sony San Diego employees, Scott Atkins and Mark Lyons, way back in 1998. They had some early hits with the Cool Borders series on PlayStation, but after entering the mobile market and a failed Kickstarter, they rebranded themselves as Deck 9. The rebranding came along with a brand new tool set that they developed specifically for making narrative-driven adventure games. This proved to be a fruitful endeavor, as Before the Storm, like I said, was a great adventure, and True Colors happens to be the best entry this series has seen so far. A common critique with the Life is Strange series was that the great storytelling the game had felt like it was trapped behind dated visuals and a lower budget production. True Colors feels like the production values have finally caught up with the storytelling, which helped suck me into the story more than ever before. You play as Alex Chen, a girl with supernatural empathic powers, which she can use to sense and feel other people's emotions, a power that ties in very nicely to the game's storytelling mechanics. After a rough childhood of jumping from foster family to foster family, Alex travels to Haven Springs, a small mountain town in Colorado. Haven Springs is beautifully realized in True Colors and is home to a very interesting cast of characters. As is common with the rest of the series, the soundtrack is also phenomenal. In fact, Haven Springs actually has a record store I would go into just to listen to some of the game's music. Overall, this is one of the finest narrative adventures available today and is a must-play for fans of the genre. Next up, we have Lost in Random, developed by Zoink and published by EA Originals. Zoink is a studio out of Gothenburg, Sweden, who are no strangers to the EA Originals program, having released the 3D platformer Faye under the banner just a few years ago. Lost in Random is by far their most ambitious title to date, though, with some pretty unique aspects on offer. For starters, the game looks like it has been ripped straight out of the mind of Tim Burton. What it lacks in a color palette, it makes up for drastically with its creative locations, which aesthetically fit perfectly with the likes of Halloween Town and The Night Before Christmas. The game's world and its characters are very memorable, and I genuinely looked forward to meeting the next NPC or seeing the next location during my playthrough. In the game, you play as Even, one of two sisters of Even and Odd, who are forced to roll a dice to determine where their futures will lie in the world of random. After your sister has an unfavorable roll, Even sets out on a quest to save her from this fate. Which leads us to the gameplay, which, by the way, is just as unique as the game's setting. Tying together the expected exploration and story is its combat system. A combat system that is very reminiscent of one of my all-time favorite hidden gems, Phantom Dust. The game combines real-time third-person action combat with deck building and is a very clever system. Your combat prowess with your trusty slingshot in third person allows you to draw cards from your pre-constructed deck, which will further enhance your ability to dispatch your foes. All in all, I can't wait to explore more of this game as its creativity leaps off the screen. Discovering games like this one is one of the best parts about services like Game Pass, because I completely missed this one at launch. Next up, we have Bug Snacks by Young Horses, published by Fangamer. Young Horses is a small indie person outfit from Chicago, Illinois. They specialize in creating quirky, innovative, and charming experiences. The founding members bursted onto the scene in 2010 after meeting up at Chicago's DePaul University with the free rare release of Octodad. The game was well received in the indie scene, and after which they decided to go on their own and form the studio Young Horses, also releasing a sequel as well in Octodad Deadliest Catch. Bug Snacks, though, is by far their most ambitious release and carries with it a lot of the same quirky charm the studio is known for. Releasing originally as a PlayStation exclusive, the game has finally made its way to Xbox and is launching day one on Game Pass. In the game, you play as the Journalist and are tasked to travel to Snacktooth Island after getting the summons from famed explorer Lizbert Megafig. Upon arriving at Snacktooth, though, you quickly realize that the island is overrun by creatures that are each a unique combination of an animal and a snack. For example, there's Frieder, half French fry, half spider, as well as Weenie Worm, half hot dog. What's worse is that the group that traveled to Snacktooth with Lizbert originally are addicted to eating these bug snacks, which in turn mutates part of their bodies to mimic whichever snack they just ingested, a process called snackification. You also will quickly learn that Lizbert is actually missing, and the town of Snacksburg is in turmoil. Throughout the game, you will meet and get to know the folks of Snacksburg, interviewing them to find out what happened to Lizbert and help them solve some of their personal issues. Of course, you will also catch a bunch of bug snacks using various traps you will unlock as you progress through the game. The game is very well written, having gotten a chuckload of me numerous times, but also tackling some pretty serious and relevant social themes. Catching each bug snack is a puzzle within itself and was an enjoyable experience the whole way through. This was one of my favorite releases of 2020, and I'm so happy that it's finally landed on Xbox. As a bonus, the game is also launching with its brand new Isle of Bug Snacks DLC, which adds new quests, bug snacks, and a new biome to explore. I highly recommend checking out Bug Snacks. It is a fantastic game. Next up, we have Weird West from Wolf Eye Studios, published by Devolver Digital. This is the first game from the newly formed Wolf Eye Studio, which was founded by Rafael Colantonio and Julian Roby, both of whom were Arcane Studio veterans. With a passion for immersive sims, this small team is completely remote, with members spanning 4 different continents. We actually had the pleasure of reviewing Weird West at Season Gaming when it released, so here is a quick excerpt from that review. Weird West had me hooked from the moment I sat down with it. It's a well-designed, interesting game that offers something a little more intriguing than a lot of games do. The moment-to-moment exploration and combat is delightful, and I loved experimenting with different ways to complete my objectives. The sandbox design is Weird West's ace in the hole, and if you can overlook some of the blandness of other aspects, you'll have a really good time. Weird West is a fantastic first title from Wolf Eye Studios, and you can be sure I'll be following them closely in the future to see what they do next. For now, I'm heading back to the lab to see what else I can make happen. If you want to see the full review by Ainsley Bowden over at Season Gaming, make sure to check the link in the description of this video or podcast, however you may be listening. And finally, we have Turnip Boy Commits Tax Evasion by Snoozy Kazoo, published by Graffiti Games. Snoozy Kazoo is a 7-person team out of West Springfield, Massachusetts, who make, quote, really, really dumb video games, which is how they describe themselves on their website. Focusing on making silly, lighthearted experiences is refreshing in an industry that can sometimes take itself too seriously, and Turnip Boy absolutely fits the bill. This was one of the first games I actually jumped into after dumping 100 hours into Elden Ring, and I think it quite honestly made me appreciate this game even more. The game has you play as the titular turnip boy, who until now has been an upstanding citizen of Veggieville. At the beginning of the game, it's revealed that the nefarious Mayor Onion has accused you of tax evasion and is going to repossess your house if you don't do his bidding. If you've not figured out yet, the game takes place in a world ruled by anthropomorphic fruits and vegetables. The game features some nice pixel art and a surprisingly great soundtrack, while closely mirroring the gameplay you would expect from a classic 2D Zelda game. The most memorable aspect for me, though, is the hilarious writing. There were many times I was laughing out loud, and a lot of jokes and social commentary landed really well for me. I will note though, however, for Xbox gamers on the console port has had some bugs being reported. I personally had some issues getting several achievements to pop, so achievement hunters beware. The PC version seems to be fine though, and the developers have been very transparent about the issues that people are finding, and they have posted that they plan to fix it in the near future, so stay tuned for incoming updates. There are also a couple of games that I didn't get to today, one of which being Unsold by Magusta Games, published by NeoWiz Games. This is a Dark Souls-inspired action, top-down action brawler game that looks to have a very good combat system and some really intriguing pixel art. I just never got a chance to jump into it, unfortunately. And also, there was Research and Destroy from Implausible Industries and published by Spike Chunsoft. This one I did get to dabble in, but not enough to give a full impression. It has a very interesting concept where it is a tactics game where you will control scientists that are attacking different zombies and other aliens. But the catch is that when you use the tactics system to position your troops, actually attacking enemies will flip the game into a third-person shooter. So it's kind of a unique concept where the miss mechanics that are often relied on a dice roll in other tactics games are actually relied on your aiming skills as a shooting veteran. So you might want to check them out as well. Thank you so much for tuning into the first episode of Game Pass in Review, this time for April 2022. I hope you liked this format. I hope I was able to provide some sort of information for you to help make your decision whether or not to download a game that much easier. Until next time, remember to like and subscribe to the video or podcast, and feel free to reach out to me on Twitter with any comments or concerns or feedback. Also, make sure to hop into the Seasoned Gaming Discord, where we talk about gaming and other random stuff every single day. Thanks again, and have a good one. Remember to have fun out there, everybody. I'll talk to you soon.